was saved, I knew two things for certain. I knew that God made me, and I knew that serving Him with my life was the only way worthy of spending my life. I knew I wanted to go overseas long term. I just asked God, okay, God, what nation? And immediately a country popped into my mind. So through prayer and through research, I learned about this persecuted people group. Months after I arrived overseas and was no longer in survival mode, I realized the deep need for community, especially as a single. And so God answered that prayer and cultivated a community through team, through local friendships, through these refugee friendships. Honestly, the hardest part of being overseas for me has been to being away from my own family. Loved ones have passed away and my nephews just continue to get bigger and bigger. It's hard to not be around. But in God's grace, this has actually been a relating point between me and my refugee friends because they are all too familiar with missing their loved ones. My team has truly become my Asian family, and they were all I had at first. My family abroad has shown me a beautiful picture of what presence is. When there's reason to celebrate, we celebrate together, and when there's reason to grieve, we make space for that. Supporting each other, being present in each other's lives, that has been a beautiful gift that also sustains the work that we're doing. With my team being my family overseas, I've really seen the beauty and the blessing of engaging in relationships together. Oftentimes one teammate plants, one teammate waters, and God gives the growth. Most of my refugee friends are girls between the age of 14 and 20 years old because they've come as child brides. They're not around their family or their moms and most likely won't see their family again. With Jesus as our model, we have a unique opportunity to step in as their family. You know, He came down into darkness and put on flesh, coming to us so that we could have home in Him forever. And so now we get to do similarly. We get to come and sit with them in their darkness and invite them into an eternal home. So family has positively impacted my ability to share the good news abroad. The most obvious way is through support. I wouldn't be able to be there without financial support, emotional support of knowing I'm not alone, but have a global family and team, and of course, prayer support. 1 Corinthians 3:6-9 says, I planted the seed in your hearts and Apollos watered, but it was God who made it grow. We pray to that end that as we go out, that the Holy Spirit leads us and guides us, and that as we share, that He would be the one to cause the growth. So, all for His glory.
So proud of Courtney, and it's a privilege to be able to partner with her and support her. I love this verse that she referenced from 1 Corinthians. The Apostle Paul wrote this, I planted the seed, a guy named Apollos, he watered it, but God has been making it grow. And that gives an insight into something that really only God can see with perfect clarity. That God is using diverse people with diverse approaches and methods and skills and gifts to bring in all kinds of people into a relationship with Him through faith in Jesus. It's through Jesus that we can be forgiven and accepted and loved. And we get to be a part of that. We get to be a part of sharing that and advancing that with others. Another way to imagine what this is describing is a relay race, and I really love competition, so that resonates with me, but it's meaningful to me for another reason. It was 4 years ago that I stood on this stage, and John Steer handed me this relay baton, and if you've started attending sometime after that point, John Steer was the previously pastor of Autumn Ridge. He pastored here for 30 years, and so I keep this on my desk. This is a cherished reminder of me, of the responsibility that I've been given as lead pastor. It was the first weekend in March 2020 that he handed this to me on this stage. The next weekend was my first official weekend as pastor, and as you all know, that was the weekend that all the churches had to shut down because of COVID. So he timed that just right, don't you think? Now, while this is a symbol for me, I don't think it's a symbol just for me. It really is for all of us. Because in a real way, our church is in a kind of relay race. And for the next few minutes, I want to invite you to think about this. Let's fixate on this running to win. We want to be a church. We're trying to be a church that runs to win. Last weekend, I met a guy who's here for the very first time, and he and his wife are touring different churches in Autumn Ridge, trying to figure out which one they're going to call their church home. And maybe some of you are here today for that very same reason. Maybe somebody invited you. Maybe you're trying to figure out this Jesus stuff. And I don't think you could have picked a better day to come, because we're going to put our cards on the table, and we're just going to state clearly the kind of church that we want to be. Well, anyway, this gentleman asked me, he said, what is this church's greatest strength? How would you answer that question? What would you say? I said, I think it's our generosity. And that goes back many years. This church has a long history of putting kindness into action. It's one of our guiding values. We make generosity normal. We invest our lives, not just our money. And last weekend, I think, was a stellar display of your generosity, of us trying to run to win. Last weekend, without hesitation, this is how you responded to the opportunity to serve families in this community. You took 223 big boxes you fill with groceries. We estimate it takes somewhere around $100 to fill those boxes. So that means over $22,000 worth of groceries you decided you're just going to donate. You did that without hesitation. Over $6,700 were raised for our mission store. Last weekend, at the drop of a hat, you just said, here's 30 grand to invest in supporting the needs of people in this community. 36 people said you wanted to volunteer for a respite night to serve adoptive families and foster care families. And if I could zoom out, in the past year, 1,100 of you have served on a ministry team in some capacity. That is awesome. It is a privilege. And for me, it's the thrill of a lifetime to get to be your pastor and to be on the same team with you. I want to share with you another number. In the past 365 days, there have been over 1,400 first-time guests at our weekend services. That means every time we gather together, there's more folks. Every time we gather together, there are more people who are curious to hear more about Jesus. This past week, I heard about a couple in our church. They're eager to get baptized, and they want to use that as a way to invite their friends and family to come and discover what they've discovered in our church. Isn't that awesome? We get to be a part of something incredible. So today we're going to think about that. I want to invite you to grab a Bible and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. There's a book in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1 Corinthians. It's written by a guy named Paul. It's a letter that he wrote to this church in Corinth that he helped start. And Paul, we sometimes call him the Apostle Paul, is a fascinating guy. He started his adult life as a hostile religious bigot. It was his goal to arrest as many Christians as possible, to shut down as many churches as possible. He's even responsible for killing some Christians. But Jesus changed his life, and he became a follower of Jesus and a leader of Christians. And what we're going to read together is just dripping with his passion and his intensity. And I want you to notice that he is all about running to win. And he's clear about what the prize is that he's running for. He writes this, we're going to start in verse 19. He says, though I am free and I belong to no one, I've made myself a slave to everyone to win as many people as possible. Here's a guy who was happy to give up his freedom, things he was entitled to, things he deserved, his privileges, his rights. He was willing to place himself literally beneath other people so that he could share with them about Jesus, so he could lead them to be fully devoted followers of Jesus. And that disposition, that attitude is going to be a thread that runs through really everything we talk about today. But this is where I want us to sit down in, right here. He wasn't just happy to reach some people, was he? He wanted to reach as many people as possible. How about us? Are we satisfied? Is there ever a time that we could be satisfied? Are we ready to put this thing on cruise control? Share with you two numbers. First number represents the population of the city of Rochester. The second number represents the number of people who live in the city of Rochester who have no connection to any church right now whatsoever. And a city of 120,000 people, 100,000 people really aren't a part of any church. And they need to know the gospel. They need gospel community. We are nowhere close to the finish line. Now, some of you guys might have heard me say this before. It is not our goal to be a big church. I think that's a dumb goal. It is our goal to reach as many people as possible. And if we're going to do that, that means we're going to have to grow to be much bigger than we are because we want to welcome as many people as possible into the family. And that's what Paul was about. And so he did this. He said to the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law. Though I'm not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, which is to love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But I did that so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I've become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. He wasn't fake, he wasn't inauthentic, and he wasn't manipulative. What he's describing is this. He changed his approach, and he changed his methodology to serve the need or to meet and serve the best interests of those who he wanted to befriend and share the gospel with. There's nothing that he wouldn't do to be able to share the gospel. There's nothing that he wouldn't do short of sin to be able to share the gospel with other people. And our question, which is the same question for every church, is, are we the same way? Is that our attitude? Is that our disposition? What do you think God would do? What do you think God wants to do with a church that this is their attitude? A church full of people would say, I don't need any of my preferences. There's nothing I want more than to lead people to become fully devoted followers of Jesus. I don't need to have my way. There's nothing I want more than to lead people to be fully devoted followers of Jesus. Paul continues, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. When the Apostle Paul talked about a crown, do you know what it is? It's the people who come to know Jesus because of your influence. Our crown are the people who come to know Jesus because of our influence. So the prize is not about us. It's not about us getting in our way. It's not about us getting our preferences, our agenda, being cozy or comfortable. It's 100% about other people getting to hear and know about and trust and follow Jesus. That's what it means to run to win. He says, therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave. He's talking about discipline. He's talking about saying no to himself so he can say yes to something better. So that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the praise. I'm not going to let anything get in the way of me getting the prize. Here's a question for you. This is kind of a show of hands audience participation part. How many of you, this is just the way you're wired, when someone has a new idea or a new way of doing things, you get all excited, you see all the reasons it will work, and you're eager to do that? Let me see, how many of you are wired? Where are my optimists at? All right, we got some eager optimists out there. How many of you are wired opposite of that? You would say you're a realist. You see all the reasons it's not going to work, why the idea is dumb. All right. How many of you are married to somebody who answered differently than you? Well, that's fun. Here's a little insight into me. I'm way too quick to flex my no muscle. I'm the kind of person I can quickly see all the reasons that I think something's not going to work. But I've discovered a question that's helped me to find my yes. And this question has helped me turn down the noise and turn up my God-given imagination and my God-given creativity. And the question is, well, what would it take? Well, what would it take to do that? What would it take to achieve that? I've been doing this long enough to know this, that there are good-hearted, Jesus-loving church people that whenever the pastor gets up and tries to inspire the church to be all about reaching the community, there are people who feel anxious about that. And so I want us to use this question to turn down the noise and turn up our God-given imagination and our God-given creativity. And so this is the question. What would it take for us to run to win? What do you think? As we think about that, I want to remind you, you know the Olympics are coming soon, right? Anybody, are you guys a fan of the Olympics? My favorite event is the 4x100 relay. I love that event. And for my money, when it's done well, there's almost no better expression of teamwork and precision. It's awesome. And so this is what I want to do to kind of get our juices flowing, to get us pumping today as we're thinking about this answer. Let's watch the USA men's team dominate. All right, here we go. This is USA right here.
First of two heats in the men's 4x100 meter relay.
Just look at him. He's about to catch him.
And that's why you put him to lead off. He has done.
It's over. It's already done.
First legs, and now here's the first pass. Noah Lyles has the baton.
The two-time world champion in the 200 meters leads this men's relay, and waiting to take over, Elijah Hall.
And here come Great Britain. Look also at Japan, but the U.S. in complete control with one pass to go.
Great Britain, Nathaniel Mitchell-Blake ran a good third leg. Good pass of the baton, and the U.S. is off. Marvin Bracey-Williams, the silver medalist in the 100 meters, blows this field away.
Domination.
Team GB gets second.
Team Great Britain came in second, which is okay too, Great Britain. Believe it or not, I think there's some stuff for us to learn from what we just watched. And that's going to become a little bit more clear as we make our way through this answer. What is it going to take for us to run to win? And I think there are three things we got to know. The first one is this: we have to know the difference between running and busyness. And the difference between this and this is purpose. Running represents all those activities that move us forward in the race. Busyness is all of those activities that require time and energy and resources, but they don't move us forward in the race. And the thing is, churches that get stuck in busyness, the kind of things that they're doing are often good things and wonderful things. They just don't move you forward in the race. They don't get you any closer to the prize. But it's worse than that. Because over the course of time, what once counted as running naturally evolves into little more than busyness. And let me give you an example from our church right now. Over the past couple of summers, during the month of June, we've done this event called ARC 18. We hosted at Riverside Elementary. This is a little guy who's getting some cotton candy from that event. Some of you have participated in ARC 18. You've invested in that. And here's the heart behind that event that we've done over the past couple of summers. We do it at Riverside Elementary to build relationship and trust with the folks in that school and to build relationship and trust with the people who live in that neighborhood. Well, this is what's come out. There's a couple of things you need to know that's come out of ARC 18. This year, because of ARC 18, we've been invited to be a part of Rochester Fest. I'm just kind of discovering what a big deal that is. I don't know if you know this, but other churches in town have tried to get into Rochester Fest, but they can't get in. We've been invited in. And it's exciting and it's humbling to be invited in, which means that we have an opportunity to build relationship and trust with even more people for the sake of the gospel. Now, the staff at Riverside Elementary, they love ARC 18. But they told us this year, with all kinds of things that are going on and changes, they're so overwhelmed, they cannot host ARC 18 this summer. Hang with me, it really is good news. Because of the trust and the relationship we've built with them, they said, instead, could we be a host site for Upward Soccer when you guys start doing Upward Soccer again? And if we're able to do Upward Soccer again, if you don't know what Upward Soccer is, it's just a church-run soccer league, and it's great for kiddos, but it's also designed to be able to share the gospel with the players and their parents. And so if we're able to make this happen, and we were to do it at Riverside Elementary, it would be just so much easier to bring in more families from that community, and we would be able to build relationship and trust in a way that vastly exceeds anything we could do with ARC 18. There's a difference between running and busyness. Now imagine with me that we're just knuckleheads. And imagine that we respond to Riverside Elementary and we say, no thanks. We just really love ARC 18, so we're going to find a different place to do it. You know what I'd be guilty of? We'd be guilty of giving our allegiance to a program instead of our purpose. And we wouldn't be running anymore. We'd just be busy instead. Now, before you get too excited, I don't know if we're able to do Upward Soccer this year. I would like for us to be able to. I just don't know that we're going to be able to do it. The missing piece right now is a leadership team. It requires about 8 people to provide all the behind-the-scenes structure and support to ensure that the coaches and the teams can function and thrive. And if you're thinking, whoa, if that's all that's needed, if you're interested in something like that, just email us, upward@autumnridge.church. If it's something that we can do, we absolutely will do. If it stretches us too thin, we'll wait and try to do it next year. Now, my intent today is not to be a hype man. I never want to do that. But I do want to inspire. I want to inspire us to be a church who's committed to running to win. And running to win doesn't just mean that we do more, because that's the trap of busyness. Being a church that runs to win says, no, we're only going to do the things that advance us, and we're only going to do the things that advance us most towards the prize so that we can see people come to know Jesus. That's what running to win is about. Which leads us to the second thing. We have to know the difference between winning and preserving. And the difference between this and this is direction. Churches that run to win are churches that face forward. And they talk about the future. And they talk about what could be. Churches that are busy preserving face backwards. And they talk about the past. And they talk about what was. And the longer that a church has been in existence, the more intentional it has to be to honor the past without dwelling in it. And this is where I think we need to talk about an elephant in the room. And some of you are blissfully unaware of it. Some of you are painfully, tearfully aware of it. What I'm talking about are the literally hundreds of folks who have left our church in the past few years and now attend other churches in town. And for some of you, it feels like a problem to solve. And if I were you, I'd probably be looking around for somebody to blame. And for some folks, I'm the one who's blamed, and that's okay. But what if the departure of all of those folks is just normal? Seriously. What if it's just normal? What if it's not a problem with them? What if it's not a problem with us? What if it's a highly predictable pattern of human behavior? This is just the way people respond to changes. Would you be surprised to know that when a church goes through a lead pastor change, especially when the previous lead pastor was there for a long time, and the first 5 to 7 years of a new lead pastor's tenure, 25% of the people leave the church and go somewhere else? And we didn't just go through a lead pastor change. We did it at the start of a global pandemic where it felt like the world was upside down and on fire. And from day one, we had to make all kinds of changes, which ultimately led and required other changes too. And it exhausted some of us. It exhausted me. The lead pastor of one of the largest, healthiest churches in the United States, many, many thousands of people, reports that in the past few years, there's been a 50% turnover in the folks who go to that church. 50% of the church left, replaced with all new folks. And for that pastor, it probably feels like a new church. Pastor Caleb and I were talking to a pastor up in the cities. He's been at his church for 15 years. And the past few years, there's been a 60% turnover in his congregation. 60% left, all replaced with brand new people. And for him, it probably feels like a new church. I won't do it, but I could keep you here all day and tell you story after story of other churches around our country who are reporting the same thing. And that's our church's story too. And yet, we keep moving forward and we continue to grow. I've got a friend who I believe God brought him into my life, and he has this uncanny ability to get me to stop focusing on myself and instead look at the bigger picture. And I want to see if we can do that together right now. And it's going to be through a what if question. My what if question is this. What if God is using this great American church shakeup to get us all ready to run the next leg of the race? What I want you to see, what I'm asking you to understand today, is that major transitions often mark entering the next leg of the race for a church. Now, this is where we have something to learn from the men's relay team. The different guys on the team, they're all running the same race, but they don't run the same way. Each leg of the race has a slightly different mix of skills, technique, and strength that's required to run it well. And what's required to get the baton to one runner is a little bit different than what's needed to get it to the next runner. If we were to take the USA men's relay team and we switched around who ran what leg, they wouldn't be a winning team anymore. They'd still run, but they wouldn't win because these guys are finely tuned to what's required for their leg of the race. You think it's any different for churches? You think it's different for us? It really isn't. Now, here's the deal. I don't know which leg of the race we're running. Now, our church is older than the state of Minnesota, so I know it's not the first leg of the race. And unless Jesus comes back while we're all getting after it, we're not the last leg of the race. There's a decent chance we're just somewhere in the middle. So if we're in a middle leg, how do we run to win? We appreciate those who ran before us. We accept the baton. This is our time to steward this well. And we advance. And our time and our needs are just different than those who came before us. What we believe is the same, the gospel message is the same, but the way we do church is a little different than the way they did church. And one day we're going to hand this off to a next generation of leaders. And their needs and their time are going to be different. And the message and the gospel is going to be the exact same, but they're going to do church a little bit differently than the way we do it. And God's going to use all of it. So in our time, with the opportunity that we have, with the influence we have and the resources we have, I say, let's run to win. There's one more thing we need to know. We have to know the difference between sacrifice and compromise. And the difference between this and this is value. Sacrifice is giving up something of value, something that truly is valuable to you, but so you can get something of greater value instead. Compromise, you really do give up something of value, but for something else of lesser value. And the older I get, the more I've come to realize that it is just easy to confuse those two. And it's not just people. Churches, too, are vulnerable to getting confused on the difference between sacrifice and compromise. If you read all of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and I hope that you do, spend some time this week reading it. You'll read about a sacrifice that the Apostle Paul made. Planting that church, leading that church, all the work that he put into it, all the teaching, all the leadership he provided, he had every right to be paid for the work that he was doing. But he recognized that if he claimed that right, it would undermine the trust and the relationships that he was trying to build. So he denied himself that right. He gave up his freedom. He gave up something that he was entitled to. He sacrificed a real need. Why? Because it got in the way of the prize that he was running after. And he would rather say no to something that he needed so that he could say yes to other people becoming fully devoted followers of Jesus, and he wanted to be a part of that. Our church and every church gets to decide, do we want to be the same way? Will we say no even to our own needs so that we can say yes to the needs of others? Are we committed to running to win? It's not a one-time question. It's the kind of thing that needs to be affirmed and reaffirmed again and again throughout a church's life. And if we decide, yes, we want to be that kind of church, we want to be a church that runs to win, I got to let you know about a couple of hurdles we're going to have to clear. And this is the section of the sermon where I feel a little bit insecure. Is it safe for me to tell you when I feel insecure? And the reason I feel insecure is because I never want to accidentally be manipulative. And whenever you stand on a stage and you talk in a microphone, it's easy to accidentally do that. And it's easy to accidentally come across as guilting and shaming, and I don't ever want to do that. I've got a friend who says, I don't want to manipulate, but I will communicate. And so that's the spirit behind what I'm going to say next. These are the two hurdles we got to get across. Kids ministry volunteers in giving. Right now, let me just say both of these are the result of ministry success and growth. Right now, the number of kids who are coming into our church for weekend services are outpacing the number of people we've been able to recruit to serve on kids ministry team. And we're about to turn into the season where people scatter, you know. Wherever winter is intense, whenever the summer shows up and sunshine shows up, people scatter. Have you noticed that? So we need a break. We need to enjoy it. Take advantage of that. But what that means is we don't see any sign at all that the number of kids coming is going to take a downturn. But we've got people who are volunteers who are scattering, which means we need some folks to join the team and say, I'll serve in kids ministry maybe 2 times this summer to help us get over that hurdle and the transition period through the summer. I'm asking you, would you consider doing that? Even if that's not what you normally do, that you would serve on that team for a couple of times during the summer. In the near future, there's going to be a couple of weekends where I'm not preaching. On those Sunday mornings, you won't see me in here. I'm going to be on the kids ministry team serving over there. I might look disheveled and crazy-eyed, but that's where I'm going to be. Come and join me. I need to talk about giving. The truth is, we're behind. And I always want to be honest, and my goal is to be transparent with you about these things. It's why on the sermon notes, I don't know if you grab those when you come in, but there's announcements on the back, and we also include giving information. We let you know what our budget is, what our spending needs are, and what our giving is. And the whole point behind that is just to be honest and to be transparent. And right now we're behind. And the easiest thing in the world to do is just say, well, just cut spending. I've done that before. And believe it or not, our staff is great at it. They've got a great track record. I'm so proud of them. I think you should be proud of them too, of knowing how to cut spending without cutting momentum or ministry effort. They do a great job. But you only cut so much till you begin to cut muscle. And I was reminded recently that this is a bigger issue than just dollars and cents. It's a bigger issue than cutting spending or dipping in reserves. It's a development issue. It's a discipleship issue. Your development, my development. Us collectively as a church taking our next step into being growing givers so that we can fund the ministry, so that we can run to win. And for those of you who give, I want to say thank you. For those of you who've prioritized regular faithful giving, I want to say thank you. For those of you who love Jesus and you love this church, but your devotion to Jesus has not yet intersected with your budgeting, and you haven't yet prioritized regular giving to your church, I want to invite you to take that step so that you can partner with us, so that you can run with us, so that we can keep moving this forward. I want us to be a church that runs to win. I will always cherish this as a gift, not just from John Steer, but as a reminder of this incredible responsibility that I have to steward. And one day, I hope it's a couple of decades from now when my hair is all gone and my beard is fully gray, that I get to hand this to the next lead pastor of this church. But between that day and today, can we carry this together?